Hello and welcome to this video. Today I'm going to try to make another set of keycaps. Now, since last time I scoured the internet a bit and I found some molds that actually have the top open, and I thought that would be maybe the solution to my issues last time with not having a pressure pot and actually using two-part sealed molds. So I basically used some epoxy sculpt, used the same keycap as last time, and I made the top flat. It of course fused to my mat that I used as a set because I forgot how, sticky epoxy sculpt is. But once I got it off, luckily the paper I could just wash off, I just needed to sand it flush with all of the edges. I don't think I can get a perfect sheen on these even with polishing, since the keycaps are textured, but all I need technically is the top to be very smooth, which we already achieve by having that as the open part of the mold. So I'm just using a nail file with two sides and some sanding sponges. These came in a previous soapy and toffee kit, and I'm actually really surprised how well you can polish epoxy sculpt. It gets a real sheen even just with some sanding sponges and not even with higher grit sandpaper. And then of course it was time to make the mold, and this time I didn't 3D print anything since this isn't supposed to be like a fancy two-part mold. I just used some cardboard. I made sure to cover all of the edges that will be in contact with the silicone with some painter's tape, since cardboard may just, soak in the silicone a bit and get fused. And that happened once before where I missed a spot, and although you can easily pull it off, it's not always the smoothest mold, so I just wanted to make sure everything is covered and sealed. And then I'm using some tape and I'm just taping down the tape backwards to my table just to make it easier to place it with some tension. And then I'm going around all of the edges, making sure they're sealed with some more tape, and then it's time to place the keycap in. The silicone I'm using is, I can't really remember if it was a 13 or a 33, but it's a bit of a stiffer silicone just to make sure that all of the stuff I'm casting, all of the details for the pegs, are properly molded. And I also am putting it in my vacuum chamber after the pour again, just to make sure that the little pegs are fully filled out with silicone, since that could be a huge issue, because they're the ones that, matter in holding the keycaps up. And as you can see, the mold turned out pretty clear. The tiny white bits in there, they're still from the casting material I used last times, but they shouldn't actually pose any significant issues in this case when I'm pouring the resin in. And again, I wanted to go with a galaxy theme, so I'm starting off by mixing some glitter into some clear resin, and then I'm mixing a pinkish tone, a teal bluish tone, and a black. And I really hope that the black will not take over once it's curing, since the resin will be moving. So I'm also making sure that the pigment powders, the mica powders, are very opaque, just so that, they will pop and shine through and not be taken over by the black. And it just helps a little bit, since this mold is pretty thin on the side, just to, make it not be as see-through. Since I cannot put this in the vacuum chamber anymore, because that would actually ruin the marbling, I'm just going in with a toothpick very slowly, and this was a very long process. And I'm just making sure that all the gaps are filled, especially for the pegs and all of the sides, because if you remember last time, those who watched the video may recall, I had to fix a lot of gaps, especially on the sides of my keycap, and I really don't want this. That's because, the reason why I actually want to try to use an open mold, since all of the air bubbles can escape now, and it's easier for me to reach everything. So I'm just going in trying to achieve a galaxy effect, going back and forth with all of the colors, and just slowly pouring them in, making sure to not introduce any air bubbles anywhere, and then I'm going to let it cure. I'm not going to let it fully cure though, because I want the next layer to stick pretty well, so I'm letting it cure till it's still like a little bit tacky and soft, but so that it will hold everything I put on top. And after that, it's just time to apply like a lot of glitter. I chose these nail art glitters from, I think it was another Sophie and Toffee box, and I put them in with some super glue and let that dry, and then it was time for a clear coat. I didn't want anything too special in this one. I just really wanted the simple like night sky design with like the galaxy swirls and the stars, and I think in the end it turned out pretty well. I tried to level out the resin. I actually leveled out the place again where the mold would sit, just to make sure that the top is flush, and as you can see, the back turned out pretty much perfect. There's almost no air bubbles except for on the side some micro ones, but I guess to avoid those you really need a pressure pot. And then I just used my scissors and again the sanding sponges to round off the edges a bit, just so they're not as sharp. The resin I did the top with, the clay pour, did actually sink in a little bit, but it's hardly noticeable, and when you use it, it still feels smooth. I just don't want any edges to like, you know, scratch my fingers on and stuff, since I want this to be an actually usable keycap. And since that worked too well, I also wanted to challenge myself and make another one. This is going to be my home button, so I basically didn't record the casting. It was the same method as I did in the previous one. And for the base I'm also using the same method. Same colors, same toothpicks, all the same, just making sure that everything is filled up nicely. And the one thing I'm changing is that I'm using a bit more color this time than black, since the black pretty much took over a lot of the other keycap, although the swirls definitely show through. Now the special thing with this keycap will be that there will be a character inside. That is why it is so much more challenging, because I need to sculpt a teeny tiny character that will fit into the mold and sit flush with the top and isn't too high. Now there's some keycaps that actually, you know, put the characters on top, but I like to have my keycap smooth because I just don't want to bump into anything while I'm gaming and possibly like maybe even knock the keycap off or accidentally press my Windows key while I'm doing something in a game where it's really annoying if I would. So I'm just going with a flat one, since this key will sit on the bottom where my hand will move over. If it was any of like my F keys, then I wouldn't have any problem with that, or like my escape key or something, which is like totally out of the way. But in this case, you know, I'd rather prefer a flat one. Now it was really hard to film this because this sculpture is tiny, but I sculpted this teeny tiny fox out of polymer clay. And then I'm just painting it with some model acrylics. And this glitter fox will sit on top of the already poured base and then just be covered with some clear coat. It actually was quite a lot of detail that went into this, so I really don't want to mess up the keycap, so I hope it works out well. As you can see, I just painted white and orange, and then I'm adding a little bit of a black wash just to give it a little bit more of like variety in color and to let the textures pop up more that I spent ages to actually sculpt. And then it was time to put it inside, so I just glued it in, and then I added some like stars and glitter on the side. And I carefully dribbled in the resin from the top. Now from this part it went pretty smoothly, and then it didn't anymore. So I got the resin really clear when I let it cure, and everything seemed to work well. Like for hours after, the resin was super clear, and then I woke up the next morning. It had already been, like the first time I checked, it was like 8 hours after I did the first pour, and then in the morning it was about 14 to 15 hours after I checked the last time, and there was a huge air bubble. I was pretty lucky because the resin was still tacky and like pretty much moldable, so I like frantically pulled out the fox trying to save that, which I luckily managed. And then I just had to pour a new base, as you may like be able to notice, because it looks a little bit different from the previous one. And I just put the fox in there, and this time luckily the pour went nicely. Now, it was quite a struggle, but I'm glad I caught it this early because it had basically this like very almost hard honey stage, so I could just use some rubbing alcohol, like really saturate the resin in there and then use a toothpick to peel it off, and it came right off. Since I was panicking and over that also in a bad time crunch because I only had like half an hour till I had to leave the house, I like really didn't have time to film this process at all, so there was no chance to like capture it on video. I almost missed the appointment I had for this, but in the end everything luckily worked out well and the keycap turned out pretty much amazing, just as I hoped it would. So I'm super happy with that. I just really am a bit like confused where that air bubble suddenly came from, since it was already like warming up and in a like soft honey stage before I last checked it. So I don't understand, maybe it's the weather. They like did something weird with the resin, since it has been pretty much warm and humid and then at night it's pretty cold. It might be that one of the weather changes like affected it and like maybe interacted a bit weird. There's like no air gaps at all underneath the fox, and the air bubble was basically in the middle where no item was, and there was like no way for an air bubble to actually like, you know, hide underneath anything and then rise, especially not since we are already this far gone in the curing time. But I'm just glad it all worked out. And in the end, both of these keycaps turned out absolutely amazing. I love both of them so much. Like, even though the spacebar doesn't have as much of the galaxy effect on top from the colors, the glitter and the stars and embeds definitely make up for that, and it's much smoother to work with. I didn't have to fix any gaps and it holds really nicely. So this was definitely the way to go. I don't know if I will make any other keycaps in the future, maybe with more characters, but for now I'm super happy. And actually, since I filmed this part, I've used this keycap for about a month or so now in active gaming and stuff, and it works super well. Even though it's smooth, like it's not like uncomfortably smooth, so you can like actually use the spacebar pretty well. And the home button, you know, it doesn't really matter since you don't actively use that in games usually or press that too often. But the look it has definitely is also very cute. I'm so happy with both of these, and I'm happy that this time actually making them turned out so perfect. Anyways, let me know in the comments down below what were your thoughts about my little project, and which kind of keycaps would you like to see or, you know, have for yourself if you could customize them. And as always, hope you have a great day. See you next time. Bye bye!